friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, you may also call me Lo, and today I'm bringing you the second video in my ACOTAR summary series. So this summary will be for A Court of Mist and Fury, also known as ACOMAF by Sarah J. Maas. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well, and let's get on into it. Right now, there are 4 books in this series and 1 novella, and 2 books left to be published. So the purpose of these videos is to refresh anybody who's either delayed reading the 3rd book or would just like to watch some summaries of each book before they read the ones that have not come out yet. Since there are now 2 videos in this series, I'm going to make a playlist of these videos, so hopefully by the time the new books come out, I will have filmed and published all 4 videos, and they will be in that playlist for you. This video is for people who have already read this series. I'm going to spoil this entire book, so if you haven't read it and you want to read it, please exit out of this video. This is not the video for you. This video is only for people who've already read the book or for people who don't ever want to read the book but want to know what it's about. I will not be giving my opinions about this book in this video. I will tell you that I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. This video is really supposed to just be a resource for you so that you don't have to remember little details about it in order to continue the series. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about ACOMAF. So ACOMAF opens 3 months after the events that occurred at the end of ACOTAR. As a reminder, the last events of ACOTAR included the trials under the mountain with Amarantha, Feyre completing all of the trials, Amarantha killing her, and her breaking the curse in her last breath, Tamlin killing Amarantha, all of the High Lords kind of resurrecting Feyre and turning her into a High Fae in that process, and then Tamlin and Feyre returning to the Spring Court. So 3 months later, Feyre is at the Spring Court with Tamlin. The two are now engaged and they are planning their wedding. But things aren't all rainbows and butterflies, and Feyre is actually pretty miserable. She's having horrible nightmares and flashbacks to her time under the mountain. Specifically, she's feeling a lot of guilt over the 3rd trial, which involved her killing innocent fairies, and she's pretty much feeling awful all of the time and is experiencing pretty significant depression, which Tamlin is refusing to acknowledge. All Feyre wants to do is help kind of rebuild the villages in the Spring Court that have been destroyed by Amarantha. She thinks this will give her purpose, this will kind of make her feel better, and Tamlin's absolutely refusing to allow her to do that because he says it's unsafe for her. In addition to that, Tamlin tells Feyre that she will never be a High Lady because there's no such thing as a High Lady in Prythian, and Feyre feels kind of belittled and diminished by Tamlin. Feyre's also kind of wondering what's going on with the mating bond. If she and Tamlin are mates, she's unaware of it, and Tamlin hasn't said anything about them being mates. There's also a new character introduced at this point. Her name is Ianthe, and she is one of the 12 High Priestesses of Prythian, which is kind of a new concept. She and Tamlin basically grew up together, they are close friends, and she is now living at the Spring Court with Tamlin and Feyre and Lucien, and she's kind of acting as Feyre's companion, kind of helping her plan this wedding. And she's also kind of made an alliance with Tamlin. Ianthe is helping Feyre basically like become the perfect wife. She's teaching her basically how to be a High Lord's wife. And Feyre is like very disinterested in this whole process because she's obviously experiencing this major depression. She's having flashbacks. She's got a lot going on kind of in her mind, and this wedding and learning how to be the perfect wife is like very much not a priority for her. As the day of the wedding approaches, Feyre is panicking because she does not feel emotionally in the right place to get married. and she isn't tremendously happy in her relationship. So when the day of the wedding comes, Feyre is like basically walking down the aisle and she's thinking to herself like, someone help me, someone save me from this situation, I do not want to be here. And she's kind of repeating these things to herself. And suddenly RHYSAND appears. RHYSAND basically announces to the entire wedding that it is time for Feyre to come and spend a week with him as part of their deal that they made under the mountain, where Feyre has to spend 1 week a month with RHYSAND. So the wedding is canceled and off they go. Feyre expected the night court to be this like truly awful, horrifying place because Under the Mountain was supposed to be kind of modeled off of the night court. So she's shocked to find out that it's actually quite comfortable and nothing like Under the Mountain. At this point, Feyre still absolutely hates RHYSAND, and she expects him to somehow make her life absolutely miserable or torture her. Instead, RHYSAND gives Feyre a nice, comfortable room and basically starts to talk to her about how she needs to shield her mind because he can hear her thoughts through this mental link that they share, which Feyre assumes has to do with the bargain that they made under the mountain and the tattoos that RHYSAND put up her arm. So during this week at the night court, RHYSAND is very nice to Feyre and basically teaches her how to shield her mind. But she is really awful at it, and RHYSAND basically tells her that she needs to practice and that over the next, I guess like 3 or so weeks back at the spring court, she should practice shielding her mind. During her time at the night court, Feyre also meets Morrigan, who is RHYSAND's cousin. Morrigan is really interested in Feyre and really wants to be her friend. Feyre's kind of feeling the same way that she felt when she first got to the spring court. She doesn't trust anyone, she's feeling apprehensive, she doesn't want to get close to anybody. However, she kind of slowly and skeptically starts to warm up to both RHYSAND and Morrigan. RHYSAND also tells Feyre that he really hates Ianthe and that the spring court is actually keeping a lot of important information from her. RHYSAND tells Feyre that even though Amarantha is dead, the threat that the King of Hybern poses to both Prythian and the mortal realm is very real, and that there is kind of an impending war about to happen between Prythian and Hybern, and that the King of Hybern wants nothing more than to take the wall down that separates Prythian from the human realm, which would put basically all mortals in danger. Obviously, that includes Feyre's family, so she's pretty worried about this. RHYSAND asks Feyre to talk to Tamlin and try to see if the Spring Court would make an alliance with the Night Court in order to kind of bolster their ability to fight back against the King of Hybern. He also informs Feyre that because she was kind of resurrected using the magic of all of the High Lords of Prythian, she has a little bit of all of their magic within her, which makes her actually like quite powerful, but that she has to learn how to use those powers and how to wield them properly. Later, Morrigan, who kind of works for RHYSAND, who's been away for a little while, comes to where they're staying and tells RHYSAND and Feyre that a temple in Caesarea, which is an area in the Night Court, has been attacked and that all the priestesses there have been killed. Enter AZRIEL and CASSIAN, who also work for RHYSAND. They arrive and they basically start to talk to RHYSAND about what's occurred at this temple. And they believe that Illyrian clans are responsible for this attack. So RHYSAND leaves to kind of meet with them and figure out this situation. We learn about all of this a little bit later, but now feels like a good time to talk about who the Illyrians are. The Illyrians are a warrior race of fairies that live in Illyrian camps, which are part of the Night Court. They are widely believed to be violent, brutal, and cruel by most fairies across Prythian, and they also have wings and can fly. They form these war camps, and they basically treat their females like crap. They clip their wings so that they can't fly anywhere, and they're pretty much stripped of all freedoms. Tattoos are an important part of Illyrian culture, and the kind of tattoos that RHYSAND gave Feyre are actually kind of Illyrian-esque tattoos. They're supposed to bring them luck and glory on the battlefield. The Illyrians also undergo this blood rite, where they have to survive in the mountains without any weapons or magic or the use of their wings. Cassian and AZRIEL are Illyrians, and they are also close friends of RHYSAND's and kind of RHYSAND's chosen family. They're also members of RHYSAND's inner circle, which includes Morgan, obviously Cassian and AZRIEL, and also a character that I will introduce later named Amren. Cassian is in charge of RHYSAND's armies, and AZRIEL is the spy master. Both Cassian and AZRIEL have siphons, which are these kind of magical jewels that are very difficult to get and very difficult to earn, but kind of give Illyrians enhanced powers. After the week at the Night Court is up, Feyre returns to the Spring Court. Immediately, Tamlin and Lucien interrogate her about what happened at the Night Court. Feyre doesn't like being questioned so intensely and feels really uncomfortable, and she accidentally burns the table that they're sitting at and then enters Lucien's mind. She kind of suddenly realizes that she's starting to show the powers that the High Lords of Prythian gave her, and that she has zero ability to control them. When she enters Lucien's mind, she realizes that she's a Daemati. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but she has the ability that RHYSAND also possesses to enter people's minds. This ability is extremely rare among fairies. 3 weeks later, when it's time for Feyre to return to the Night Court, she's pretty relieved because she's super miserable at the Spring Court. At the Night Court, similar to the first time, she practices shielding her mind with RHYSAND. While her shielding has improved, RHYSAND notices that she's lost weight and just seems super depressed. When she returns to the Spring Court the next time, she talks to Lucien about trying to learn about and trying to kind of practice using her powers. Lucien agrees that she should train, but Tamlin refuses. When Tamlin and Lucien learn about a threat to the Spring Court, they decide that they have to go and investigate, and Feyre asks if she can come with them, and Tamlin says no. Feyre kind of refuses to accept Tamlin saying no to this, and Tamlin basically locks her in the Spring Court manor magically, and she's basically unable to leave. This causes Feyre to have basically a major panic attack. She's feeling claustrophobic, she's feeling out of control, and she just kind of loses it. Suddenly, Morgan appears and takes her to the Night Court, even though it's early and she still has more time at the Spring Court before she's obligated to go to the Night Court. At the Night Court, RHYSAND and Morgan welcome Feyre and basically tell her that she can stay as long as she wants and as long as she needs. A little bit later, RHYSAND takes Feyre to VELARIS. VELARIS is a city touched by starlight at the Night Court. It's a wonderful, amazing place, and Feyre asks RHYSAND why Amarantha didn't destroy it. And RHYSAND tells Feyre that nobody knows about it. It's secret, and Amarantha didn't know it was there to destroy. RHYSAND also takes Feyre to the House of Wind, which is on a mountaintop, also in the Night Court, and is where she ends up meeting all of RHYSAND's inner circle. The only new character at this point is Amren, who I briefly mentioned earlier, and Amren is kind of the last member of RHYSAND's inner circle. Amren is an extremely powerful High Fae, and like Feyre, we learn that she once had a different body. She is second in command after RHYSAND of the Night Court, and Morgan is third in command. All of the members of RHYSAND's inner circle have super interesting and tragic backstories. RHYSAND spends a lot of his time investigating this impending war and kind of trying to figure out what the King of HYBERN is up to. In this process, he finds out that the King of HYBERN is in possession of the necklace that Amarantha wore and the ring that Amarantha wore. If you remember, the necklace had kind of a finger bone of Jurian's, and the ring had Jurian's eyeball in it, and his soul was kind of captured in these pieces of jewelry. And if you don't remember, Jurian was the human who kind of seduced Amarantha's sister and kind of violently murdered her. So the King of HYBERN has come into possession of this jewelry, and RHYSAND wants to know why. So he and Feyre go to visit the bone carver. And the bone carver lives at the prison, which is also located at the Night Court and is a very kind of scary, terrifying place. RHYSAND decides to take Feyre here because he thinks that the bone carver might be interested in some of the information that Feyre can give him about what it was like to be resurrected and kind of her experiences under the mountain in exchange for the information that they want. RHYSAND also brings along the bone that killed the worm of Midgard during Feyre's second to last trial under the mountain, because he thinks that the bone carver might be interested in that as well. Like I said before, the prison is kind of this notoriously terrifying place, and when Feyre tells Amren that she's feeling nervous about it, Amren gives her a special amulet that's supposed to protect her while she's there and ensure that she comes back alive. In the prison, the bone carver, who looks different to every person, looks like a young boy to Feyre. The bone carver accepts the bone that killed the worm of Midgard and asks Feyre a few questions about what it was like to be resurrected. So Feyre describes this pure darkness and this kind of thread that she yanked on and pulled on to come back to life. She also describes how she kind of watched herself die and be resurrected through RHYSAND's eyes. She believes that this thread is kind of a physical manifestation of her connection to RHYSAND that was established through their bargain. In exchange for Feyre's description of her experience, the bone carver gives them information about the King of HYBERN. Specifically, the bone carver describes the cauldron that basically formed the world. And along with the world, other evil things were forged with the cauldron. He tells them that Jurian has been brought back to life through the ring and necklace that kind of had harnessed his soul. He also explains to RHYSAND and Feyre that the cauldron is no longer usable because it's been broken into pieces, and that the King of HYBERN is trying to gather the pieces of the cauldron to put it back together, and he's also trying to gather the 2 parts of the Book of Breathings, which basically explains how to use the cauldron. If the King of HYBERN manages to put the cauldron back together and get the Book of Breathings, he can use the cauldron to shatter the wall that separates Prythian from the mortal world. However, the thing that the King of HYBERN is currently missing is the Book of Breathings, which has been separated into 2 pieces. Currently, the mortal queens, new concept, have 1/2 of it, and the other half belongs to the High Lord of the Summer Court. If Feyre and RHYSAND manage to get the 2 pieces of the book and put it back together, they can nullify the powers of the cauldron. So the first step is to contact the mortal queens, and the mortal queens basically rule the mortal lands. So RHYSAND and Feyre go back to Feyre's village, and ELAIN and NESTA agree to kind of facilitate a conversation between Feyre and RHYSAND and the mortal queens. Unsurprisingly, ELAIN is kind of scared of the 2 of them. Remember that they don't like fairies, but she's also warm, and NESTA is cold and standoffish as always. While they're in the mortal lands, the ACOTAR, if you remember the ACOTAR was kind of this monstrous fairy creature that was kind of Amarantha's servant. The ACOTAR tries to kidnap Feyre. The ACOTAR fails to kidnap Feyre, but tells Feyre that the King of HYBERN plans to attack Prythian and that he would like Feyre. Ultimately, Feyre and RHYSAND are unsuccessful in trying to contact the mortal queens, and they head back to the Night Court. There, AZRIEL continues to kind of try to use this network of spies that he has to get into contact with the mortal queens. Feyre uses this time back at the Night Court to practice using her magic and to learn to fight, which she decides to do after almost getting kidnapped by the ACOTAR. Slowly, she gains control of her skills and also starts to come to terms with what happened to her under the mountain and the kind of trauma that she experienced there. Feyre also learns that the amulet that Amren gave her to go visit the bone carver at the prison was not magical in any way, and did absolutely nothing to protect her, but was meant to kind of give her confidence and make her feel better. RHYSAND also tries to contact the High Lord of the Summer Court, obviously to get the other half of the book, and eventually RHYSAND, Feyre, and Amren are invited to visit the Summer Court. So the High Lord of the Summer Court's name is Tarquin. At the Summer Court, Feyre's job is to basically locate the book using her connection, her magical connection to Tarquin, which obviously she gained when she was resurrected. The group decides not to ask Tarquin for the book outright because they think that there's a chance that he would resist. After spending a lot of time with Tarquin, Feyre starts to really like him and really doesn't want to betray him. But after she figures out where the book is located, it's kind of located in this building kind of at the center of a bridge. And as the tide goes up and down, the building is revealed or concealed. So after she figures out where the book is located, or where the half of the book is located, she and Amren go and steal it. I'm not going to describe the escapade of stealing this half of the book, but it was dangerous and Feyre and Amren almost died trying to get it. When they get back to the Night Court, they realize that the Book of Breathings is written in Amren's native language, which is this very kind of archaic ancient language that nobody can read except for Amren. They suspect that reading the half of the book that they obtained might help Amren return to where she came from. As time passes, Feyre continues to train. Amren spends her time trying to decode the Book of Breathings, and the whole crew waits to hear back from the Mortal Queens. When they finally do hear back from the Mortal Queens, they head back to Feyre's village. This time, the whole inner circle goes to Feyre's village, and there they finally meet with the Mortal Queens. At first, the queens outright refuse to let them see the book, or the half of the book that they have. When Morgan explains the consequences of the wall getting destroyed, specifically for mortal people, they agree to allow the inner circle to see the book as long as RHYSAND can prove to them that he's not this like terrible, awful person that everyone thinks he is. Remember, even though Feyre and RHYSAND are now getting along, RHYSAND has a horrible reputation. So the inner circle goes back to the Night Court and tries to think of a way to prove to the Mortal Queens that RHYSAND is trustworthy and that his reputation is incorrect. This time back at the Night Court, Feyre learns about Miriam, who is a half-human, half-fae who was once a lover of Jurian's. But she left Jurian for a fae named Drakon. After the war ended and Jurian died, Miriam and Drakon were also believed to be dead. However, they were not, and they fled to an island, which is the only place in this world currently where humans and fae are living in harmony. Eventually, RHYSAND comes up with the idea to show the Mortal Queens VELARIS, which proves that he was hiding things from Amarantha and that he's truly like taking care of a place responsibly, and that the Night Court isn't like under the mountain. In order to convince them that he isn't tricking them into seeing something that isn't real, he decides to show it to them through this magical orb, which has been used in kind of agreements between mortals and fairies forever. And it contains truth magic, so it's impossible for RHYSAND to lie via this orb. And this is something that the mortal queens know. However, the orb is currently located at the Court of Nightmares and must be stolen back. The Court of Nightmares is a horrible part of the Night Court. It is actually the part of the Night Court that RHYSAND showed Amarantha and told her was the entire Night Court. And that is actually what she used as a model for her palace under the mountain. When RHYSAND is at the Court of Nightmares, he always puts on this grand show to show the people there how cruel and brutal and awful he is, because that's what they want, and that's kind of how they operate over there. So when they arrive, they do just that. While RHYSAND is demonstrating his brutality and his abuse of power, AZRIEL has the opportunity to steal the orb. Before they go, Morrigan's father, who lives at the Court of Nightmares, insults Feyre, and RHYSAND breaks a lot of his bones using magic, again demonstrating how awful and horrible he is. The next major event that happens is that RHYSAND is attacked while he's flying with ash arrows. He's able to avoid them, but he realizes that someone is tracking him when he uses his magic. Because of this, the whole group decides to kind of lay low at an Illyrian war camp where RHYSAND, CASSIAN, and AZRIEL used to train. While RHYSAND is hesitant to use his magic because he thinks he's being tracked, Feyre continues to practice hers. While there, Feyre learns that Tamlin's family actually killed RHYSAND's mother and sister. In retaliation, RHYSAND's father killed Tamlin's entire family. And that is all the information that Tamlin had given Feyre. Later, while Feyre is training, Lucien and a couple of other members of the Spring Court track her down and basically try to convince her to come back to the Spring Court. Feyre refuses, and RHYSAND sends them away. Feyre and RHYSAND decide to get away for a night, and they decide to stay at this local inn, and of course, there's only one bed. This is the first time that Feyre and RHYSAND become intimate and kind of discuss their feelings for one another. On their way back from the inn, RHYSAND and Feyre are flying, and RHYSAND is once again attacked by ash arrows. This time, RHYSAND is struck in his wings and in his legs and plummets to the ground. While they're plummeting, RHYSAND and Feyre are separated. Feyre eventually finds him and drags him to the safety of this cave that she finds. There, she learns that the ash arrows are actually poisoned and that RHYSAND is dying. She has absolutely no idea how to help him, and she only knows one way to possibly figure out the answer. So she captures the Suriel in the forest for the second time. If you remember, the Suriel was the type of fairy that roams around in the forest, and if caught can answer all of your questions truthfully, but it's a very dangerous endeavor to try to catch the Suriel. The Suriel tells her that she has to let RHYSAND basically drink her blood because her blood contains healing powers that were bestowed upon her by the High Lord of the Dawn Court when she was resurrected. The Suriel also kind of drops a bomb on Feyre, telling her that RHYSAND is actually her mate and that he's known for a long time. Feyre's absolutely infuriated by this news and the fact that RHYSAND kept this from her. Once RHYSAND recovers, Feyre decides to leave and spend some time alone because she's just really upset and feels betrayed by RHYSAND. Morrigan takes her to a remote cabin, which is a place where the inner circle used to spend time together, and it's got food and kind of everything Feyre needs to spend some time alone. Hi, so I was editing this footage and I realized that a small amount of footage was missing, so I'm just here filling in the gap. So after Morrigan leaves the cabin, Feyre discovers this kind of stash of painting supplies there that Amren had used a previous time at the cabin. And she starts just furiously painting the interior of this cabin. So if you remember in book 1, Feyre's passion when she was living at her village was painting, and she used to paint small things kind of around her house. So she starts painting this cabin, and she realizes slowly that she's painting things that remind her of all of the members of the inner circle, including RHYSAND. She starts to envision what she wants for her life and what she's going to do with immortality. And she starts to kind of realize that the inner circle is a really important part of that kind of vision that she has for her future. She paints the cabin for a total of 5 days, and then RHYSAND shows up because he finally figures out where she is. Feyre lets RHYSAND in, and RHYSAND kind of explains the whole story of when he found out that Feyre was his mate, which was at the Calanmai celebration in book 1. However, he was dreaming about her for years and years before that and could actually see her through their kind of mate connection painting at her old house, at her old village. In book 1, she paints this kind of starry night sky scene at her house, and it turns out that that was kind of something that had been transmitted from RHYSAND to Feyre because RHYSAND was at the time looking at the night sky. Feyre then serves RHYSAND some food, which in the fairy world is a gesture that means that they're accepting the mating bond. And then RHYSAND gives Feyre the ring that she got earlier in the book from the Weaver. They spend the rest of the day and night together at the cabin. Back at the night court, the circle finally hears back from the mortal queens, and they go back to Feyre's village to show them VELARIS through the orb. But the mortal queens refuse to give up their half of the book. It's very frustrating and upsetting, and the mortal queens leave. But evidently one queen didn't agree with the others, and she left the second half of the book behind for them to find. So the crew now has the entire book, which is great, and before heading back to the night court, Cassian kind of vows to protect Feyre's sisters from the impending war. Even if they're mortal queens, they're rulers and supposed protectors won't. Back at the night court once again, Amren finally finishes decoding the Book of Breathings. This victory is relatively short-lived because they hear about an attack on VELARIS. As it turns out, the King of HYBERN has invaded and is attacking VELARIS, and this happened because they were betrayed by the mortal queens. The inner circle and Feyre successfully managed to kind of hold off the invading army, while RHYSAND tries to figure out how to protect VELARIS. And he does that by like putting this protective ward into place. After that saga complete, with the book finally together and decoded, the team decides to sneak into HYBERN and nullify the powers of the cauldron. But absolutely nothing goes according to plan. Feyre was supposed to touch the cauldron and speak a spell in order to nullify it, but she doesn't manage to do that, and the whole team is captured by Jurian, who is remade. The King of HYBERN uses magic to keep them all kind of bound and to keep them from using their own magic. And he starts to threaten AZRIEL with an ash arrow. This time, in addition to the mortal queens, Tamlin has also sold them out. He is there, and so are the queens, who are evidently interested in becoming immortal through the powers of the cauldron. Feyre's sisters have been captured, and the King of HYBERN uses them as kind of guinea pigs to show the mortal queens that the process of becoming immortal through the cauldron is not painful. As a result, both of Feyre's sisters turn into High Fae against their will. Tamlin and Lucien are shocked and kind of appalled by this development of Feyre's sisters becoming High Fae against their will, and it turns out that Ianthe was the one to give the sisters' location to the King of HYBERN. At this point, we learn that Ianthe actually has a plan to get rid of all of the High Lords of Prythian and to have the lands be ruled by the High Priestesses instead. As Nesta is being turned into a High Fae and is screaming, Cassian, who's critically injured at this point, reacts very intensely. At this point in the book, there's a lot going on, but two major things happen now. First, Tamlin reveals that he thinks that he's saving Feyre from RHYSAND. And second, Lucien realizes that ELAIN, Feyre's sister, is his mate. At this point, Feyre decides to lean into Tamlin's belief that he's saving her from RHYSAND. Once she knows that her friends and family are safe, she basically pretends that she's getting her memory back and that she had been brainwashed by RHYSAND. And she starts to beg the King of HYBERN to break her and RHYSAND's connection. However, the King of HYBERN doesn't know that RHYSAND and Feyre are mates. And so the connection that he breaks is the bargain connection, where Feyre had to spend a month at the Night Court. However, Feyre's mental connection with RHYSAND and their mating bond is intact. Then everyone gets out of there and RHYSAND starts to prepare for this war. Feyre goes back to the Spring Court with Tamlin, but now she has a secret because the night before, Feyre became the High Lady of the Night Court. So that is it for my summary of A Court of Mist and Fury, also known as ACOMAF by Sarah J. Maas. If you're still here, thank you so much for being here. I always really appreciate it. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I will be coming out with 2 more videos summarizing this series and probably 2 more after that, summarizing the 2 books that haven't come out yet. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you next time.